evening, Indiana. Me again, Scott Aaron Rogers here from the Progressive Indiana Network with another virtual town hall. Tonight, joining me, 4th Congressional District Democrat John Whetstone is here to take your questions. We are live on YouTube, on Facebook Live, and at our home at progressiveindiana.net. You can submit your questions to John at any of those locations. I'll be happy to bring them up on screen, and we'll hear what John has to say to you. So go ahead and start lining up with your questions now. There's also a web form QR code floating around there somewhere. That still works too. So however you want to get your questions to the candidate, we have a way to get them to him. But before we get to any of those, let's have John introduce himself and say a few words.
Hey, thanks for having me tonight. Super excited to be here. If you're tuning in from the last event I was at in Martinsville, I'm going to say a couple of similar things, but I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about that we didn't there. So my name's John Whetstone. I'm a small business owner from Crawfordsville. I own a retro games and collectibles store. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. It means if it's nerdy and worth a few bucks, I buy and sell it. So I grew up in a small trailer park just outside of town. Both my parents worked multiple jobs just to help make ends meet because we were drowning in medical debt. And that's something that I guarantee you know somebody in your life who is struggling with medical debt. It's very common in our area. And I remember my dad, he would come home from his factory job. We'd have breakfast together, and then he would get changed and go to his second job. So it's something we struggled with. And the harder he worked, the sicker he became. And the sicker he became, the more in debt our family became. And we know hard work is supposed to be rewarded. So past that, in the trailer park, we had a lot of different people who lived there. We had people who were restarting their life for various reasons. We had older people who were living on fixed income, and that's what they could afford. We had people who couldn't afford starter homes for their families, but they could afford the rent on a rundown trailer. And as a young teenager, I was pretty angry. My dad had died, and my mom was working a ton of hours to make ends meet, and the place we lived wasn't great. But I'd look outside, my neighbors were super happy, and we were all living in similar situations. And I wanted to be happy too, so I would go talk to them, as you do. And what they said was roughly two things: that they believed they worked hard and they're persistent, that where we lived and the situation we were in was only going to be temporary. And we know this is supposed to be the American dream, that if you work hard, it's rewarded. And I have worked hard. I worked multiple jobs to help put my wife through school. And we were persistent. We saved every penny we could. And we lived in that same trailer park for years, actually. So we could afford to open our own business. But we're seeing the rules are being written by those at the very top and their political friends as cover for each other at the expense of us and our well-being. And to stop that, we're going to have to remove big money from politics, raise our minimum wage to $17.25 an hour, and tie it to inflation. And we need to move to a single-payer healthcare like Medicare for all or something similar that eliminates the insurance companies' need to be involved in the process. These are some of the things we can do, and we see our government misappropriating money to give weapons to places like Israel to commit genocide or to attack Iran. So we have the money, we don't have the motivation, and we need to put people back in the focus of our policies. So yeah, that's what I stand for. I don't know. Let's go from there. I'm excited.
Well, I'll tell you what, John. I know the health care is very much central to your story, and your dad working himself ragged, working himself to the grave, sadly, and leaving you and your mom with a mountain of medical debt on top of your grief, right? And you've talked about supporting a single payer Medicare for all model. And we talked about this a little bit the other night on Tuesday on the Who's Left podcast together. And, I'll sort of direct folks to that discussion if they want more in-depth coverage of your healthcare plan, basically. Mm-hmm. But, just as a brief overview, you said you want to go sort of the Bernie Sanders model, eliminate private insurance, increase rural transit to get folks in rural areas access to these new, medical opportunities that they'll have, right? But Medicare for all doesn't happen on Inauguration Day. Even in an ideal world, say you and Democrats win, and in a couple of years we get a amenable president and can pass something like Medicare for all, there's going to be a transition period, right? Rural hospitals are closing now in your district. Like labor and delivery apartments are shutting down now. So what does the transition period look like, and how do we get there?
I think obviously the government can fill the gap a little bit with straight funding to try to keep these places open before we get to a place where we're going to implement Medicare for all. The question is up here. Cool. So it's really just going to have to come from government funding, because we need to eliminate the need for the insurance companies and the private hospitals. So we're really going to just have to throw dollars at it at first.
How long in your plan does the transition period take to get from our current private healthcare model to single payer Medicare for all?
I do not have a strict timeline on it right now.
Okay, very good. Something you might want to look into. I know down here, Brad Meyer in my district talks about a Medicare for all plan. He says the British managed to do it in like 4 years or something, coming out of World War II. Now, again, that was then. This is now, and same thing with with Medicare. They implemented that on index cards, right? We have computers now, so we have certain technological advantages to what they had back then, and I think it really comes down to the will to get it done,
Yeah.
In addition to healthcare, another thing that a lot of Hoosiers are concerned about, a lot of Americans in general are concerned about, is our education system. In Indiana and other red states especially, you see a lot of school privatization, and that affects the funding for public schools. And on our web form, Bonnie in Crawfordsville wrote in to ask what you will do to improve the funding for Indiana schools.
So it starts with we need to incentivize systems to stop going to private schools and charter schools. Again, I'm going to bring up more funding. We have the money in our system to be able to fund these things. We misprioritize it, but we definitely just need to start funding more programs in schools that are more practical for students as well. Like the school I went to, we had a fire EMS class and a law enforcement class to train the officers, and there was also a automotive class. So we need to fund these programs as well. So I guess it goes back to we need to incentivize not privatizing schools, and we need to fund existing programs and expand ones we have.
And I guess we're largely talking about K-12 public schools currently. What about higher education? What do we do about the system now where you find students, saddled with tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt after they graduate? Is student debt a thing that should even exist?
No, it shouldn't. It's good for our country and it's good for our workforce to have educated people. We shouldn't charge them for these degrees. It leans into kind of our healthcare issue. It's expensive to become a doctor, so not a lot of people do it. We need to make it more accessible. I'm from the generation where they told all of us that, hey, if you get a computer engineering degree, if you do something with coding, you're going to be set. This is great. They sold a bunch of us on that dream, and now we have AI slashing workforces. We have companies like Amazon laying off thousands of workers and Meta. And all my friends who went to school for coding, they didn't pay those off in the 5 years they've graduated. They've been laid off by 2 or 3 different companies by this point. So we really need to make sure our education is free and it's good for the workforce, and it's just good for the people. Again, back to my friends, they're being crushed under their school debt. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it goes beyond your friends. That there's millions of us out
here.
Right,
those are just people I talk to daily.
and John, it's like that is money that could be percolating through the economy, doing useful things instead of just going to banks, right?
Right. It's not just on a spreadsheet. It's actually going to your small businesses and things like that. I'm also a big fan of education starts before kindergarten. Our daycares need to be funded as well. Very similarly, people are removing themselves from the workforce so they can take care of children instead of doing things they want for their careers. We need to be funding our daycares because it's good for the families as well as the children.
Let me ask about that, and stop me, viewers and listeners, from asking all the questions. Submit yours online on Facebook Live, on YouTube at progressiveindiana.net. Please, I don't want to be the one asking questions. I want to relay yours. But with that said, on daycare, we saw during the Biden administration that there was the Build Back Better plan, right? And part of that was what the administration referred to as like human infrastructure, investing in people, not just things. And, there were a couple of holdout Democrats in the Senate, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, that sort of wouldn't get on board with that. They wound up splitting the bill apart. The good progressive wish list stuff got cut out, and we were left without that sort of thing. Would you have supported that sort of plan where we invested in daycare as human infrastructure?
Yeah. So a big core message of my campaign is putting people back in the focus of our policies. We have the dollars. We have the means to get more dollars through taxing the 1%, things like that, closing tax loopholes, and raising the corporate tax rate. We have the money. Our economy can afford to invest back in our people and make sure we put people in the focus of the policy.
So, we had a debate over here on Progressive Indiana Network for the 4th Congressional District. That was a week ago yesterday, Saturday the 11th. That is available for folks to go back and watch on at progressiveindiana.net if they want to see all 6 candidates in this race now. Go head to head, answer the same questions. One of the things we did in that debate was Derek Holder, who moderated, hosted this sort of speed round thing. He calls it Hold 'em or Fold 'em. Brilliant. Great gimmick.
Great. Good branding.
So, yeah, I know, right? His parents named him well. But part of that is, just straight up or down answer these questions, yes or no. How do you feel about such and such position? And that's great. Kind of gives a quick answer to certain things we didn't get a chance to dig in deep to. But we can dig into some of those things tonight.
I love it. I am actually not a fan of yes, no questions because there's so much gray area and everything in the world that every time I leave, I'm just like, well, someone's not going to like that one. And I can't even explain myself.
It's listen, there's only so many hours in a day, right? We'd be here forever if we wanted to dig in deep to all of the various issues that affect people's lives. But one of the things that Derek asked in that town hall during the speed round was if you would support a assault weapons ban at the federal level. And I believe most of the candidates said yes, they would. And you said no.
Yes.
So why? What do you what's your reasoning? And what is your gun violence prevention plan?
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked because this is one that I know every time comes up in those, and this is the one I want to be able to explain myself. So gun culture where I grew up, very big. I grew up in a family where we hunted for squirrels, things like that to help supplement our food. But goes beyond that, where the Second Amendment is a right, and to etch away any part of it, that's a big deal. And I feel like we should exhaust other options before looking there. We need to invest in things like our mental health facilities and our care. We need to have better programs to teach people safety. We need to invest in things like our communities being affected by drugs and things like that. And most importantly, we need to raise people's way of life and well-being by raising the minimum wage. Things that impact their lives it should lower crime rates. It should improve people's lives generally and hopefully get a core issue of the gun violence before we start etching away at rights. And I don't feel like we've properly done that in this country, invest in the people before looking at what's a constitutional right, in my opinion.
There are, I suppose, other ways to go about making assault weapons more difficult for folks to come across without doing things like an outright ban. I know some proposals that I've heard out there imagine treating guns more like we treat cars, where we're not banning anything, but, you know, we are making sure everything's registered, everything's licensed, people have proper training, maybe they have to carry insurance, maybe the insurance on a thing like a semi-automatic weapon would be exceptionally high. What do you think about that sort of proposal?
Big fan of classes. I'm fine with registration. I'm fine with licensing. I think those things, because it is a right, should come at no cost. That's where the insurance thing to me is a little tricky. That I would have to go with the rest and say there should be no cost. Unfortunately, like I think having people well trained with it, well educated, licensed, even passing certain checks, that's all fine with me. I just think it needs to be a free process, much like voting should be free, and there shouldn't be a poll tax.
Interesting. You don't hear this perspective and, you know, this way of looking at things a whole lot in Democratic spaces. So whether you agree or not, I think it's refreshing to have some disagreement there. And, you know, listen, you are in a largely rural district where there are a lot of gun owners who, you know, for better or worse, or what, you know, whether there's any truth to it or not, think, oh, the Democrats are coming to get your guns, right? And John Whetstone, definitely not coming to get your gun.
No, I'm not. I hear it from Republicans that I'm interacting with when I'm like canvassing. They'll say things like that. It's like, well, I'm actually I'm a rare Democrat, I guess, in your mind, because I have something to tell you.
Listen, I'll tell you, for the longest time, we sort of like mocked, I think, the idea of a tyrannical government coming to take your guns. And well, listen, sort of got a bit of a tyrannical government right now.
They
and
did
you know, I think a lot of folks, a lot of liberals and leftists are like, yeah, maybe you need to rethink this whole gun thing.
They did kill someone in the street saying he had a gun, and that was justification. So,
yeah. That's certainly true. And,
I guess I'll get in and abolish ICE real fast while I'm talking about that.
Well, you know what? Listen, I'll tell you what. I have that one queued up. Since you mentioned it, and I think you're specifically referencing Alex Preddy, who was a licensed gun owner who was legally carrying at the time that he was disarmed and then shot multiple times in the back by ICE agents. So. This sort of thing, obviously, we don't want to see that from our federal agents. Can that agency be reformed, or do we need to get rid of it?
Absolutely not. They've shown to be untrustworthy with their position. They've shown to be just thugs and the largest gang now in America at the tune of $85 billion and counting. These officers need to be held accountable. The whole system needs to be held accountable. They need to be abolished. We can replace them with things like caseworkers to help people in their pathway to become citizens or residents. We don't need people with guns chasing people through the streets and shooting them. This very easy abolish ICE for me.
Yeah, and this whole you know, they said they were going to go after the worst of the worst, right? And we've seen the numbers that the actual people that they're arresting, a very small minority actually have any kind of criminal record. I just saw this past week they arrested an 86-year-old French grandmother and deported her back home. You know, dragged her out of her house in her nightgown. Like that is not the kind of immigration enforcement we need. There are, like any law enforcement organization, there are rules and procedures and ways that you should be doing things, and that is certainly not the way. So I want to go back to last week's debate and sort of dig into some of those yes no questions a little bit more. And we talked about the assault weapons ban. You know,
that was the only one I remember.
Yeah. Well, one of the other questions that Derek asked was whether you supported expansion of the U.S. Supreme Court. There are currently 9 justices. The court has been packed District through Republican shenanigans over several cycles to the point that it is, it's essentially an extension of the Republican Party at this point. And, many folks think that expanding the court is a way to dilute some of that influence, maybe bring it at least back to neutral, where they're an actual arbiter of the law and not a bunch of political hacks. You were the loudest yes on that question of Supreme Court expansion.
Was I really?
Yes, you were. To what? What number are we expanding it to? And why do you settle at that number? And how do you answer the objection that some folks are like, well, if we expand the court, the next time Republicans get power, they're going to just expand the court too, and then we're going to have to do it again, and then it's like a race to the bottom. How do you explain that?
Right. So I think we need to expand it to 12 just so we can put it to a true balance and rebalance it to where there's 6 and 6 on the conservative liberal side. And then we need to put in term limits and a rotating schedule for every 4 years. One of them's rotating out. It guarantees every president gets at least one pick, minus if someone has to retire early, things like that. To me, it makes the most sense of just trying to have a rotating schedule for the seat. Might not necessarily be for the justice, but that way we can keep it rotating in fresh perspectives so we don't have the same people there gaining too much power, as we've seen with some of them and certain things they're accused of.
Don't you need to have an odd number just to get a verdict in cases where there might be an even split on the court?
That's fair. I guess I'm envisioning a world where people are working together. You're right. It probably needs to be 13, with the one being just a neutral party that both groups can agree on. I'm trying my best to look the good in people, but you're right. It needs to be 13. I don't know why I said 12.
Well, 13 is kind of a nice number in that it corresponds to the number of federal circuit courts. Whereas I believe when we went to 9 originally, that was the number of federal circuit courts, and it hasn't grown since then. So that there's at least an analogous reason to choose that number. You're not just pulling it out of thin air.
Got it.
I want to say there was, let's say it wasn't a question in your debate where we had a straight up, yes or no, up, down, but we had a debate yesterday in the 8th District. I was backstage for that one. Our good friend Rachel Chatham moderated that, and one of the questions she asked, kind of along these same lines, because we have the Supreme Court is one of these sort of anti-democratic checkpoints built in to our Constitution, where the elite class can check the will of the people, make sure they're not getting too far out ahead on equality and rights and whatnot. But one of the other features of our constitutional system is the Senate, and currently large, sparsely populated rural states are overrepresented in the Senate relative to their population. Like Wyoming has the same number of senators that California does, despite having, 100th the number of people. And one of the suggestions to sort of remedy that is to admit new states. And the prime candidates for that are D.C., the District of Columbia. These are U.S. citizens. They pay federal taxes, but have no actual voting representation in Congress. They have a non-voting representative in the House. No senators. Also, Puerto Rico has been a U.S. Commonwealth, a territory for 125 years. Their status has been up or down. They've taken votes. It's kind of non-binding and many times over the years. Those are also U.S. citizens. What should we do with them? Do you support statehood for D.C., Puerto Rico, both?
Yeah, both of them, even Guam as well. All of our territories should be extended to full statehood. America shouldn't be an imperial power. We shouldn't have territories. They should either be part of the United States or not. And so we should be respecting them and giving them a say in our government.
if Wyoming gets 2 senators, Guam can have 2 senators too. It's
Right.
only fair.
Exactly.
Or you roll all the Pacific Islands into one state or something.
They should have representation, is what I'm more getting at, and I think every territory should have that.
100%. Some sort of voting representation for sure. Absolutely. It's undemocratic that citizens don't have a equal voice in their government. And I guess the other anti-democratic feature that I want to bring up while we're on this sort of thread is the Electoral College, right? It sort of bakes in those biases that are in the Senate into the way we elect our president as well. That is something that would require a constitutional amendment to change. Do you support a constitutional amendment to get rid of the Electoral College?
I do. I really do. I think the Electoral College had a reason in the past. I think now we've seen presidents win without winning the popular vote. That shouldn't happen. And we can do that. There's also a state pact that's been going on that once they get to enough, it enacts, and then we can bypass this part just by having our state sign on to it. So you can press your state legislators to try to sign on.
Virginia just joined this week. We didn't get a chance to talk about that on the Sunday morning show this week. I had pulled the article, but there's just too much to talk about. But they've got a big election coming up this Tuesday, actually, in terms of redistricting there.
Oh, because it's their referendum, right?
Yeah. They want to redraw their district to favor Democrats the same way California did. They have to take it to the voters. It's not like when we had it here in Indiana, they were just going to ram it through. Thankfully, we have enough moderate Republicans in our state that they didn't go through with that. So hey, thanks guys. When you're right, you're right, and I'll give credit where it's due. So I want to go back to our web form and. I'm going to actually come back to Bonnie in Crawfordsville again because she asked a couple questions from us, and housing affordability is a big problem right now, certainly, and that's like buying your own home. That's like the fundamental part of the American dream, and it's just really out of reach for so many people right now. And Bonnie asks what proposals you have to improve housing affordability. And also, what would you do to address the unhoused?
Yeah, so for affordability on housing, I do think if we raise the minimum wage, it's just going to give us a little bit more flexibility in what we can spend. I think we also need to address our rental units. I know Crawfordsville in particular is pretty bad right now with out-of-state companies buying up these properties and raising the rent without doing anything. Recently, I was over at one helping someone move out because the rent had raised too high. And I talked to another couple who said they're moving out the week next because the same thing, they couldn't afford it on their fixed income anymore. So we need to put some caps in place and limit how much they can be raising the rent, as well as improving wages. And by moving to a universal health, like a Medicare for all system, we also just have more money in our pocket as well. So hopefully that addresses the affordability aspect a little bit. Addressing the unhoused, that's going to take a lot of money, and that's fine because we owe it for people to have houses. We have more vacant homes than we have unhoused population. So, and we also have things that we see all over our cities, like strip malls with the big like old storefronts like Sears and things like that have closed. Why can't we make those into apartments to help get people, and government funded ones, to get people off the streets and give them a place to stay to restart their lives? Because I've known a lot of people who all they needed was a place that had a shower and a consistent place to sleep because they were trying to get a job and it was hard to stay clean to get a job. So I think we can get innovative with some solutions. And like I said, try to retrofit some buildings we have to be more free housing for people who need it.
Let me throw another one at you kind of along these lines. Now, other countries, Austria, for example, is really good at this, have robust public housing systems, high quality public housing where it's not like a stigma to live in it. Now, here in our country, we tried to do public housing in the 60s and 70s, and we built these massive high rises. I'm thinking of like Cabrini Green in Chicago, for example, and these were largely considered a policy failure. Should we try to build public housing again, and what should it look like this time?
So I'm not an expert enough on this subject to really talk about this question. I am taking notes here. I'm going to write this one down because I am interested in knowing more. I would say I think more public housing is good. We need to add more supply to the circulation. So having public housing, I think, will go a long way. But I don't know enough to really get into this question. I'm going to take a second to write it down real fast. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a film of this so I can look at it here.
Very much in the same way that if you say a public option would lower medical, like insurance costs, because the private sector would have to compete with the government. Well, if you're building high quality public housing that was desirable for people to live in, and that was the thing that they could get into, well, now you've got private landlords that have to compete with that, and maybe they would lower the rent.
Right. That's the idea. I just don't know enough about the specifics. I don't want to commit to something and not know the full entirety of it. So from the sounds of it, I like the idea of having the public housing. I just want to know more before I give you a really hard answer.
Listen, I for one, appreciate when a politician says, I don't know, let me look into that, because there's a lot of folks out there who are very good at saying a lot of words without actually saying anything. So
exactly. And that's part of the reason we're in this mess, is people aren't saying what they actually mean.
Yeah, honesty and I don't know is refreshing to me. So here's one you might not know a lot about, and I'm going to come back to our web form and go to Tabitha in Covington. Now, Covington's in the 8th district, not quite in the 4th, though. Kind of on the borderline there. It's getting awfully close. It's right on the cusp. But Tabitha asked what you will do for the autism, neurodiverse, and greater disability community once you get into office.
Yeah, so I don't have a firm plan for that, but I do think investing in our social workers and our social well-being will go a long way. And I know that touches on a lot of these groups, but I don't have a specific thing past we need to be investing more into our social work schools, trying to raise wages for our social workers and get more social workers, because we're stretched so thin. We see things like DCS having less and less staff workers, things like case workers, case managers, things like that. So we really need to take our social work field seriously and invest in that. But I don't have a specific policy that says touching on one of these groups.
Yeah, and there was more to her question. I can only fit so much on the screen at one time, obviously. And one of the things she elaborated on was asking about applied behavior analysis, which is, kind of an intervention for autism. And currently, Hoosiers and caretakers across the country really are experiencing decreased access to this thing. States like Indiana, especially, are limiting access to ABA therapy because we only got so much Medicaid budget in our states. If I'm putting like 2 and 2 together from your universal health care plan, that sort of becomes less of a concern. There would always be money for whatever therapy is necessary.
If it's healthcare, it'll be covered. Yeah, if it's healthcare, it'll be covered, and it sounds like that's healthcare to me. So that's, I think, would fall under that, and hopefully get help there being consistent.
If a doctor says it's healthcare, it's healthcare. At least that's the way we should treat things, which I don't have this one queued up, but that framing makes me think of the abortion question. And, I suspect as a good Democrat that you support a woman's right to choose. But, we currently have things like, the Hyde Amendment that prevents any federal spending on any abortions. Would abortion services be covered under John Whetstone's universal health care plan?
It would. Again, it goes back to it being healthcare. It's between someone and their doctor. It's healthcare. We got to help pay for it. We got to pay for it. It's a human right.
Very good. Again, I ask folks out there in the chat. I know you're watching. I see the numbers. We got some folks watching there on Facebook Live and YouTube. We've got some folks watching on progressiveindiana.net. Do not be shy. John wants to hear your questions. He's tired of listening to me. So submit your queries for our candidate on those fine sites. And if you got that QR code floating around, you can still use that as well. So I want to ask, well, listen, this is not a question per se, but Christine on YouTube, that's my mother-in-law, hi Ma, says, many people are retiring, and this is true. And along those lines, I meant to ask something about Social Security. I hope one day to be retiring, but folks my age and your age are worried that retirement is not going to be on the table because Social Security will not be there for us, even though we've paid into it our whole lives. At the current rate, it is due to go insolvent by like 2032. That is right around the corner. And at that point, without any intervention, benefits would automatically be cut like 28% across the board. Republicans want to privatize Social Security. They say that's the way to extend its lifespan. What is your plan to keep Social Security solvent and well-funded so I can retire eventually? I can't keep doing this, man.
Yeah, no, I get you. So I want to touch on a couple of things you said. The first, so I'm about 30. I'm between 29 and 30. A lot of people my age, retirement's the last thing on our minds because we just don't feel like it's going to be there. And 2032 is around the year my mom's supposed to retire. So definitely something I'm concerned about is her well-being. And I care about everyone's well-being like that. And so with this, I think the way to solve it is removing the payroll cap, because people like Elon Musk, who's getting $1 trillion pay package, he's only paying his part of Social Security on the first 180,000. So you are paying a higher effective rate than he is. We need to understand they can pay their fair share. They can help pay for these programs. We need to start charging them for it.
That is certainly an easy fix right there. To I believe doing that and that alone extends the viability of Social Security well off into the future, and it's a travesty that folks like Musk are not paying
I've
their
seen
fair share.
Various estimates, so I don't like to put a year on it, but yeah, they're it's expected to go quite far from there.
I believe you could even increase benefits if we taxed the wealthy at the same rate on all of their income instead of just the first 180,000 or whatever it was.
I haven't looked into that personally. I've been trying to make sure it's there in the future. I haven't looked into using that money to increase a little bit.
So, you mentioned you're a young guy, right? You're not 30 yet.
I'm almost there.
Congress. You get to Congress, you're going to be one of the young ones there. That place is full of fossils. It might as well be the Smithsonian Museum. There's so many fossils in there. But, most of your colleagues would be twice your age, at least. What do you understand about our current moment that they do not?
I'm going to go to one that I get in trouble with every time I talk about it. So my campaign manager is probably going to be texting me here in a second. A big way we have approached our campaign, because it's expensive to run a campaign, is we unfortunately purchase data and we use it to target people for phone calls and ads. We look at things that you care about, and then we kind of send a message that we care about that matches towards you. It's allowed us to extend the dollars we get in your donations. We can make them go farther than just buying postcards and yard signs. But because of that, I understand how scary that is. I understand it's scary that I can get online right now and probably find out what news station my household watches regularly. That's not good. And I guarantee most of them don't understand that can even happen. Before we started this process, we purchased some of my own data just to see what was there, and it needs regulated. And unfortunately, companies use this, campaigns use this. I feel like I'm one of the only people that understands this and will be a big benefit to them for this age range. Talking a little bit about technology.
Yeah, because whereas this data is out there, and John here is theoretically using it to reach people with a good, positive message. There are folks out there who use that data for nefarious purposes.
Exactly, and it's just regulating who can buy it and for what purposes. It feels like that's something we should be able to do, but I don't think some people I even know like how to use their computer properly, and that's okay. Just different generations, different skills, and they need some younger people there to tell them like, hey, this is why it's scary. This is why it's wrong.
So we're talking about joining Congress there, and you have some elders to look up to, or maybe not look up to, maybe disagree with vehemently, frequently, and Aaron on YouTube. Hey, thanks for the question, Aaron. Says he's glad to see you here, John, and he asks about the political figures, living or dead, who inspire you, and I'm going to start there in Congress. Who of your potential future colleagues is doing things the right way?
This one might be shocking. I'm going to say Thomas Massie at the moment. He is showing a lot of courage to work for what I also agree with is the common good of the Epstein files, getting them released. He's willing to break his party ranks for something he believes in and something that is good. So I would be willing to work with Republicans if that meant the minimum wage got raised. I'd be willing to work with them. It means we have a healthcare plan that covers everyone. And I respect that from him. So I'm going to say Thomas Massie at the moment.
All right. What about on the Democratic side? Is there somebody there who is doing things the right way?
Probably AOC. You can't be super far left and not respect her. So hopefully our next president,
I like her a lot. I would run through a brick wall for AOC myself. Not to editorialize too much or anything, but let's expound upon Aaron's question here and talk about maybe some of your historical idols in the political realm.
Okay. I'm gonna go out here and say my dad is a big influence on my political life. We grew up very poor in a very red area. But he told me all the time about his union life, very Democrat, was very proud of it, and it helped me be a proud Democrat. So I'm gonna say my dad real fast as my favorite political figure. He had me so excited about politics. I was 14, going to Tea Party meetings to heckle the speakers and ask them questions, and he would drive me, and my mom would drive me. They wouldn't go inside, but they'd be like, "Here, go have fun, go be proud of who you are." So I'm going to say my dad on that one for political figures. I know you guys all don't know my dad. If I had to choose someone else, I know there's still a serving member. I'm going to say Bernie Sanders. He's just shown to be so caring about the people and there for the people. He's probably going to be my pick. Try to pick
he
someone
asked
else.
About the dead. Do not write me off so soon. So listen, today is April 19th. Which means for a certain subculture of people, tomorrow is a holiday. It is 420, which is, for folks who've been living under a rock, is sort of the national holiday celebrating cannabis use. What do you think about weed, John? Is it about time that we legalize this thing at the federal level?
100%. It's a revenue source that we need to tap into. Some states are doing it. The federal government should do it. Past that, it's sorry. This is a subject I usually stay away from because as a young person in politics, every other person assumes you're just here to legalize marijuana. I am supportive of that. I'm excited for everyone who's going to enjoy their holiday tomorrow. But yeah, we need to legalize it so we can tax it, so it's regulated, so people know what they're buying. Just move it to a safer market because so many people use it. We see it's impacting alcohol sales, where so many people are ditching alcohol for marijuana. It should just be legal at this point. It's It's safe-ish, or in the same realm as alcohol, things like that. We just need to legalize it, let people do what they want, decriminalize it, take the drain off our prisons, restore people's lives. We just need to start there.
All right. Very good. Hey, that was fun. It was good to be able to relay your questions to John. That's what we're doing here. So please, if you have any questions for the candidate on Facebook Live, on YouTube, on Substack Live at progressiveindiana.net, put those in. But while we're waiting on some more from you, the audience, let me go back to some things I wanted to ask about. And
can I plug something real fast?
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, we just talked 420. I completely forgot. I'm going to be at the Crawfordsville 420 rally tomorrow, talking to people, meeting people. If you're feeling like being there and being supportive, I'll gladly see you there.
Well, hey, speaking of things that grow in the ground, right? Indiana is a major agricultural state. The 4th District in particular is heavily rural. Indiana agriculture depends quite heavily on migrant labor. Yet, the voters in your district and across the state, unfortunately, have largely backed President Trump's immigration crackdown. How do you talk to farmers in your district about this issue?
So this issue usually doesn't come up to me from farmers, unfortunately. What we usually does come up is the cost of like fertilizer and how that's going up. China's not going to be exporting sulfuric acid here soon. It's cut off in the Strait of Hormuz. It's going up, and it's going to choke a lot of farmers. And then we hear about the exports, how we've lost crop market share in different countries, things like that. So this one doesn't come up, and it's mainly talking about the cost of imports and exports and how we need to make new markets for our food. Unfortunately, it's hard to get a market back once they found a different supplier that does it cheaper. As a country, we have a lot of things that could use the food. Like we have schools that could use free meals. We have unhoused shelters that could use free meals. We can make a government program to set a bar in the market to buy product to fulfill these needs in our communities.
And I suspect you don't hear about this from farmers because they know damn well that agriculture depends on migrant labor.
I agree. Yeah, usually a lot of farmers I talk to have been Republican, and we're trying to cross bridges and flip the seat. So when we're talking, it's kind of about what they want to talk about, and unfortunately, they do hide from this issue that is pretty glaring.
It's an interesting dynamic for sure. So I want to go over to progressiveindiana.net now, where our friend Colton asks about your thoughts on data centers.
Okay, so they're coming up everywhere, and we need to put a stop to them. We don't have the full picture of what they do to our land, what they do to our water and our resources. So we need to put a pause on that for sure until we can actually look into the damage. We've built enough of them now, we can look at it. And I know near where I live, Lebanon, there's a big data center going in. You can see for miles. Yeah, you can see for miles the big light, like the light pollution from the construction sites. And you go and talk to anyone who lives around there, no one's happy about it. No one wanted them. I've never seen communities so united in Indiana besides against data centers. So to me, it's absurd that we have politicians running them through. And I was in Monrovia recently talking to folks. It's 600-acre facility getting thrown in, and they have buildings behind barbed wire fence, perfectly good homes, talking about unhoused populations and things. We have homes, but instead we're putting them behind barbed wire fence to destroy them to build more data centers. Our priorities are being super misplaced, and data centers are just the most glaring realization of that in our communities.
because this is such a timely topic, it's something we hear about all the time here. Indiana is sort of ground zero for the data center boom. I guess I want to expound upon it a little bit. Senator Sanders, who we've mentioned a couple times here already tonight, is calling for a nationwide moratorium on data center construction. Is that a thing that you would get behind?
100%. Like I said, we need to identify how many we need. Like, we need to do this more controlled than just let's explode the market, let's damage a bunch of a bunch of areas and environments. We need to actually look at it and have time to do that. So I would support that.
Now, okay. Let me dig into that a little bit.
Sure.
It sounds like the free market is sort of racing to do as many of these things as fast as possible. Each company wants to corner the market on generative AI, on sentient AI or whatever they're trying to do. I'm not entirely sure. Is this something where, if the government was overseeing it and in control of the construction, it would be better than if the private sector was taking care of it?
Yeah, so I think with this race to the bottom, we're seeing AI companies do a lot of shady things, stealing information, things like that, to make these models work. And the government needs to be able to regulate in every step of this process, because this is something that, like generative AI, it doesn't make art uniquely. It's taking that from other artists and making what it wants. So we need to regulate that. We need to protect people. But then, with the construction, if it is needed somewhere, the government should have a heavy hand in that to make sure our water tables aren't being damaged, things like that.
Is there any way to do these safely if they are, powered by sustainable, carbon-free, clean energy, if they are cooled by closed-loop water systems, if they are built on land that is not prime agricultural land? Is there a way to do this safely and sustainably?
So I've read things that say both ways. I'm not an expert in this, and at the time, I do think there is mechanisms to make them safe, from my understanding, but I don't know enough to be confident on that. And I want to make sure the science is there and it's not just heavily disputed to prove that certain things can be done in a safe way.
A lot of the folks who say that, we need to let this market develop, that we can't, put obstacles in front of it, cite China and the national security concerns of China getting ahead of us on AI. What do you make of that?
I am a firm believer that if we are good neighbors, our neighbors will be good neighbors to us. So if we aren't starting confrontation with people, we shouldn't have to worry about them starting confrontation with us. If they want to race to the bottom and damage their environment, I'm against that, but I have no say in that. I do have a say in us damaging our environment and harming our communities. So I'm going to do what I can to protect our communities. I think the cybersecurity aspect of it's a little overblown.
So, folks, we got a little less than 10 minutes here to still go tonight. And if you've got some more questions you want to ask for John, please submit those right there in the chat at Progressive Indiana Network. And we're also on Facebook Live and on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you in this last little bit of time we have left. But as we wait for a few more questions to trickle in, I guess I want to ask, let's say Democrats take the House, which is they're widely favored to this November, and they even take the Senate, which increasingly seems like a possibility. Well, you still got old Trump there with his veto pen, threatening to crush anything that gets past Congress. What could a Democratic majority actually accomplish with him still there?
I think he cares more about his name and legacy. He's gonna be fine. I do think there are some things he would veto, but realistically, I think we can raise wages. That helps everyday people. I know he's going to care about that. We can do things like our rural transit, Medicare for all. I don't think he would sign on for, but I do think we could do things that tangibly impact people's lives, like investing in rural transit and rural internet access, raising wages. I think he would sign on for those kind of things.
It sounds like you're suggesting that there's maybe a window to work with the guy. Now,
yeah,
this is a man who has defied the courts and launched an unconstitutional war and, committed all sorts of bribery. And, there's still January 6th. I mean, pick your impeachable offense. You get to D.C., I think a lot of Democrats are going to be chomping at the bit to get this guy out of there if they have a sufficient majority in Congress. Are you saying that you don't really want to pursue that angle?
I would. I do think he has committed crimes and done a lot of things that are bad for our country, terrible. I would support impeachment. I'm just saying if he's there and he's not impeached, I think we can work together, but I would support this.
Okay.
I don't want to mix the two.
Good.
I would support it.
I just wanted to clarify, it sounds like there's a couple different paths one could go down that way. Let us talk about Trump a little bit more. Now, he ran as a right-wing populist. You're sort of going down the progressive populist lane, I would say. It's sort of same anger, right? The elites are the problem here. They're screwing the little guy, but the target is different, right? He's blaming the immigrants and they're blaming the trans people, right? We're saying, no, it's the billionaires, it's the oligarchs. How do you get his voters who see that something is wrong and see that they're getting screwed by another group? How do you get them to see this through your lens?
So I'm glad you asked this one. I grew up in a trailer park where most of my neighbors voted Republican and where they flew Trump flags or Trump adjacent flags in the pre-Trump times. And we had to talk and communicate because we were neighbors and that's what we do. So taking that same energy as I've been campaigning, I've been going to places where they know it's a top-down issue. I'm talking like apartment complexes, trailer parks, things like that, where people every day know there's someone above me that I'm paying money to. And then when we have that conversation, they know there's the CEO of their company that's making millions could be paying them more. They know these things, and that's what's been so great is they got conned by the rich guy. Unfortunately, he was rich and said he cared. And he knew their issues, and he's done nothing to make their lives better. He's made their lives worse. And I think they understand that, hey, this guy, he comes from like the same place we do. He understands because I do. And that we're tapping into it. And it's been pretty great, honestly, how broad the spectrum is of support in our campaign. We have a lot of socialists. We have a lot of Democrats, Republicans, and even libertarians working on the campaign, because we all understand it's a top-down issue.
Very good. So I guess, we just got a couple minutes here. I wanted to ask you one more question before I let you sort of give your closing remarks and we can wrap up here tonight. What is, John, we talked a lot about policy tonight. What's the most important thing that a congressperson can do that has nothing to do with the legislation that you pass?
Being a part of the community. I'm talking not just going to town halls in each community, that's important, but your barber should still be in your community. Your doctor's still in your community. Just being part of your community so you are interacting as much as possible wherever you're at. I guess that's what I'm going to say is just being part of your community more than just town halls and doing the work of it. Just being a person in your community.
Well, John, with the last couple minutes here that we have today, what would you like to be your parting words to your community?
Oh man, I want to start by saying I appreciate all the support I've had throughout this whole process. It's been overwhelming, just the amount of nice words, donations, volunteers. And we always need more, so you can visit whetstoneforcongress.com to donate, volunteer. We're closing in on the final days of the election, but we have thousands of door hangers that need to go out. We have a lot of phone calls to make. We could really use your help. I'm always taking questions. If I couldn't get to it here, or you're watching a video and you want to know more, feel free to message me on Facebook or through the website, and I'll happily make a video and send it back to you.
All right. Very good. Well, I do appreciate you being here with us tonight. We are back next Sunday night. Another one of these. We've got 9th District Democrat Brad Meyer back again. He's done a couple of these with us. So I've really enjoyed those. He's got one more in the pocket here before we get to Election Day. And then there's only one more Sunday. So the 2 weeks from tonight, we've got Tim Peck in that same race down here in the 9th. Thank you once again, John Whetstone, for being here with us this evening. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Thank you for your questions. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Have a great week. I will see you again, same bat time, same bat channel next week at this time. But until then, I am Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.